What does Florida need to accomplish in the transfer portal right now? Well, they're after Penn State transfer wideout KeAndre Lambert-Smith. Brandon Olsen, Lockdown Gators, joining me here on the show. How good of a chance do the Gators have of landing the former Nittany Lion?
If he is truly looking for what he said he's looking for, which is an offense where he can be featured and play a lot, and an experienced starting quarterback, I feel like Florida should realistically have a pretty good chance of landing him. I obviously there's NIL is going to be a thing as it always is in 2024, but if you're looking for an offense where playing time's available at wide receiver and they're looking for a top option with Eugene Wilson III, Florida has that. And there are very few quarterbacks, if any, right now in college football that have more experience than Graham Mertz.
Yeah, he is one of the most experienced guys. I think he's solid. We've talked about him here on the show before. I don't think he's the reason you win games, but he can certainly be a reason you don't lose games, and that's something. That's something. Florida's brutal schedule, though. You can use all the help that you could get. Do you think that KeAndre Lambert-Smith comes into Florida if he were to transfer there? Is he the number one wideout, or is he just one of the top options?
I think he'd be 1A, 1B with Trey Wilson. Trey Wilson's just someone that they're going to give the football to a lot. And I mean, he earned that last year. He had an average depth of target of like 3 yards, but he was averaging like 11 yards per catch. He creates a lot after the catch. They're going to continue to give him the ball. If the spring game was any indicator, they are going to force feed him the football. But outside of him, there is no proven starter at any level of that receiver room. So I would imagine that KeAndre Lambert-Smith would immediately be 1A, 1B, and probably be used as a more complete receiver, whereas Trey Wilson does some of the gadgety stuff.
Does it feel like this is a need to get for Florida, or is it, we'd like to have him. He can help the offense. Here's the role. We can give you what you want. But, if we don't get him, it's no biggie. Like, is wide receiver what you would describe as a position of need for Florida in this spring transfer window?
I think that the coaching staff feels like they need to bring in a receiver that can start and contribute immediately. My opinion is that I think you need to add some experience to the room, but I'm not too hung up on it being an immediate starter or just a veteran depth piece that rotates in every now and then. But I do think the coaching staff feels like they need to add a starter right now.
What else is Florida looking at in the transfer portal? They've had a fairly solid cycle, but as they enter the spring window, which is of course open until April 30th, which is when players can enter the portal, they can come out of the portal anytime that they please. What other needs is Florida looking at right now?
The interior of the offensive line is definitely a position that they're looking at. Tried moving Damian George from right tackle to right guard. He had a rough spring camp, we'll say. Spring game wasn't awful,
That
but
sounded like you're trying to be nice.
I am. I am trying to be nice. I don't like to be mean, but it's pack it in, big dog. So I do think that they're going to be looking at guard there because besides him, they just have a bunch of freshmen, whether redshirt or true there. And that's not a position that you want to be in with an offensive line that last year was just straight up terrible. You don't want to have back-to-back years with a straight up terrible offensive line. So offensive line is going to be a spot. I wouldn't be shocked if they went for another depth piece on the interior of the defensive line either. But I think for the most part, they're pretty comfortable with the roster that they've built so far.
They've been, a team that is trying to regain what they once were, and Billy Napier hasn't brought them to that forefront just yet. Are there any moves, are there any names out there that you feel like can just give them the sort of season that they're looking for? The win total is 5.5, but if you gave them a Big 12 schedule or an ACC schedule, that win total is probably 7.5, maybe even 8.5, but probably 7.5 would be the number there, which is a pretty sizable gap. Are there any of those impact moves that could kind of change the tone and tenor that Florida has been tied to?
I don't think so, honestly. At this point, I think that they've got a roster that you're only going to improve so much with what's available in the transfer portal right now. Maybe adding a KeAndre Lambert-Smith or Justice Ross Simmons or someone from the at the receiver room that'll help if the coaching staff does not feel like they have starter quality guys throughout. But for the most part, you've built this roster. You had young recruiting classes that were strong. And now it's just about actually putting together the product on the field. You've pretty much had a complete turnover of your coaching staff since you got hired. The only people remaining, Mike Peterson as the edge coach, Rob Sale as offensive line coach, Jabbar Jaluk as running back coach, and every other position coach has changed since Billy Napier got hired. So this is something that you've had the opportunities to change things on the coaching staff. We complained about the coaching staff a lot last year. Now it's time to put up or shut up. You've had your time to build the roster, get some results.
You mentioned Justice Ross Simmons, who's a transfer from Colorado State, honorable mention in the Mountain West last year with the Rams, a guy who once upon a time played tight end in his career whilst at Air Force, big body guy, 6'3", over 200 pounds. Would you, as a Florida guy, want KeAndre Lambert-Smith and Justice Ross Simmons, or is it, hey, KLS is the primary pursuit, that's the number one target right there because of the level that he's played at previously, and Justice Ross Simmons is, maybe like a consolation pursuit, or is this offense in a state where you need to add both of those guys if you can?
The rumor is that they want to add 2 receivers in this portal. So if you can add both of them, that'd be ideal. They do have kind of a leg up with Colorado State's receiver, Justice Ross Simmons, I'd want to say, because in the winter portal window, they also brought in Clay Millen, Colorado State quarterback, that was starting and then got hurt and then lost the job at that point. He transferred in during the winter window. Justice Ross Simmons has said that he wants to play with Clay Millen again, that he's considering taking a visit to Florida. I feel like that one, if you're Florida, is a bit of a slam dunk, and you should be able to secure him. And then if you can add KeAndre Lambert-Smith, that gives you both a starter that you added immediately and a guy that you can just rotate in and be a contributor coming off the bench.
What would these receivers mean for Graham Mertz in 2024? How much could he be helped if they were to bring in at least one or maybe both of these guys?
I think a ton. I think the offense last year, the main thing that they lacked as far as pass catchers were players who could separate consistently. Khalil Jackson, number 22, is a circus catch specialist. And it's great that you can make catches over defenders at will. That's a really fun thing to do. It's more fun if you don't have to do that because you can just create natural separation. And I think that Florida really lacked that. They have speed, but still guys that don't separate from their corner. So I think that adding a receiver that can separate specifically over the middle of the field, you lost Ricky Pearsall. I think Graham Mertz would very much like having another option that he can actually trust in the passing game.
With Trevor Etienne no longer in the fold at running back, is that a position that Florida could look at in the transfer portal, or are they pretty set in the backfield?
I'd be shocked if they did, especially after the performance from the spring game, which I know don't put too much weight in the spring game, but their true freshman backs looked really good. I think that Trayon Webb has taken a step forward. Montrell Johnson looks like he's running like healthy Montrell Johnson again. Cam Carroll's coming back from injury. Running back room looks pretty solid at this point in the game. I don't think that it's something that they're going to be looking to upgrade in the portal.
I hear that statement a lot. Don't put too much into spring games. Well, don't put nothing into the spring game because it's not a game, but it's an organized team activity, the likes of which you have at practice all the time. And you know what goes into putting together a depth chart or understanding who's going to start is those practice environments. So I don't mean to harp on you at all, Brandon, and I don't even think you were making the point. I just think that that's a notion that I hear all the time. Well, it's just a spring game. Like I've seen stuff over the years go from spring game to fall camp to the field in the fall in a pretty natural progression. So I definitely wouldn't take nothing away from it. But that's the latest over in Gainesville. Brandon Olsen, Locked On Gators, joining me here on Locked On College Football. Brandon, thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.